So we did this poll in July. We specifically looked for likely voters in the Chicagoland area. And that was, of course, dominated by Cook County and Chicago, but we also brought in Will and DuPage and Lake counties. And so we're asking not two hospital workers, we're just asking sort of the regular electorate out there about some issues and also providing them with some information because, you know, think about healthcare until you're in the hospital either for yourself or someone else, spending all this time there, and all of a sudden it's the most important thing in your life, right? Page down on this. Oh, that's not. Scroll. I'll just scroll. Okay. So, like I said, we did this in July. There were 551 total interviews. They were all done by live interviewers, not bots or computers or anything. And about half of the people, a little more than half of the people we contacted were on their cell phones. Obviously, that's where you got to go to get people today, particularly anyone who's under 50. And again, we did do a screen on active registrants who we think are likely to vote this year. So with this sample size, we've got a margin of error of about 4.2%. That's just a lot of details about some subgroups that is in here for somebody who's reading it. As I said, we were in 4 counties, overwhelmingly Cook County because of population, but also a sizable subpopulation in DuPage, Lake, and Will. So the demographics, when you pull all those counties together, we got, you know, it's about 52% female, but we got a pretty broad range as far as education level, racial groups, and party reg that reflects, when you put all those 4 counties together, the overall electorate. And here's, you know, right off the bat, there's a reason right now, I think we're having a big debate on whether people really want a universal Medicare for all system or whether that's going to get beat up in the negative campaigns and end for us. But here at least, we tried to make it a very explicit, you're using words like taxpayer funded, you know, no holds barred. And we still got 65% of all people saying, yeah, we're ready. And personally, I feel like the long rollout of Obamacare and then people attacking a plan that kind of started on the right-wing side anyway, has led people to be more cohesive around this idea that we need to find a way to get everybody in the pool and lower costs, you know, and that's what it takes. But nonetheless, I find this fairly striking. Would you favor or oppose replacing health insurance system with a taxpayer-funded national plan that would cover all Americans? 65% overall said they favored it. 74% in Chicago, which is no surprise. But look at the numbers for the rest of Cook County and DuPage, Lake, and Will. I mean, that's an overwhelming 2-to-1 support, even in the areas we think of as suburban and more conservative. You can also see that whether you're college educated or non-college, we got pretty similar high response across various socioeconomic groups. And even by party, obviously Democrats are more for it, but the numbers from independents and nonpartisans is 67, and 1 in 3 Republicans. 1 in 3 Republicans, which is a bunch of suburban Republicans, are like, yeah, this is starting to make more sense to them. So just an indication of where the healthcare debate is right now. No surprise, we asked people if they had ever received care or someone in their family received care at a Northwestern, Advocate, or Presence facility. And about 56% have personally received care. These are the dominant healthcare organizations in the area. 66% if you include their household. And that was pretty even across the whole area. These are the major players, right? And then before we really gave them any explicit information, come on in.
Hi.
Hey. About what we're thinking about the hospitals. We just started with a general, I'm going to say some phrases and tell me whether it describes these hospital and healthcare organizations in your area. And probably the most positive thing for them was creates jobs and strengthens the Illinois economy. It's like, yeah, they're big, they contribute, they have jobs. But the second one is it also describes them that they probably pay their executives unreasonably high salaries. I wouldn't say people know that, they just assume that. 49% say, yeah, that pretty much describes them. And then you get into this big area in the middle where they're not really sure what these organizations are doing. Do they give back to the community? I mean, you would kind of assume that they would get something a little higher there, but you've got a lot of people, about 30%, who are saying, I don't really know that they give back to the community. And then there's this soft support of, yeah, I guess, I mean, they're in healthcare, they must, right? But not really high. Do they pay their employees a livable wage? They don't really know. Are they good corporate citizens? They don't really know. Do they treat their employees fairly? They definitely don't know. You know, there's like 45% saying they don't know.
They don't know.
And then one of the key things that is sort of the crux of the public policy debate for us is, do they put patients before profits? And you know, just the assumption is more that they definitely don't do that than that they definitely do. I'll show you some more numbers on that one. And then do they act like nonprofit charities? That's getting more into the insider baseball where they should be, but everyone's like, no, they don't act like they're not-for-profit. They don't act like they're charities. And this is before we give them any messaging whatsoever, right? And do they charge reasonable prices? Well, that's an easy one. No one's going to say that. So here's more of a breakdown of that put patients before profits, because this is what we're asking groups who operate in the nonprofit realm to do, right? That's kind of the point. So you've got this weak sort of 16% saying, yeah, that probably describes them, 28% somewhat, but a real sense that this might be an issue, and I think this is where we try to influence the debate somewhat. Again, kind of similar no matter what jurisdiction we're in, and not a heavily partisan thing. You know, if anything, Democrats are trying to give them the benefit of the doubt. They're putting patients before profits. But pretty much you've got a quarter of the electorate saying that definitely doesn't describe them, no matter what your political outlook. And if you add the only slightly describes, you know, you're up to 40% of Republicans. So in essence, you know, we get this immediate sense that there's time for pushing some a little more progressive values here for the healthcare. You know, the fact that people want a progressive fix on healthcare, and these organizations are well known in that people know the names, they've had healthcare from them, but they don't know a lot about them. And just that initial report I showed you indicates that they're sort of like, well, you know, if I kind of need to know more about that. And that is a real opening to start pointing out the things that we feel are injustices. Here's another aspect of it. Nobody knows whether they pay property taxes. You've only got, you have 13% who are incorrect saying yes, they pay property taxes on all their properties. And then you've got a large group not sure. That doesn't really surprise me. But should they have to pay taxes? Yeah, 66% say they should be paying property taxes. Only 23% think they should not. So we tested some arguments for changing healthcare organizations or companies' status, because part of the issue here is that people kind of assume that they're corporations because they act like corporations, and they're getting all of these benefits that corporations don't get. So part of it is that they're stashing money offshore to maintain their nonprofit status, that they are taking what you call profits, i.e. revenue that didn't go out in costs, and they're putting it in offshore banks to, and that immediately strikes people as wrong, and they say that's a very strong argument. But all of these are, you know, 60% of people, even not having a lot of information about it, we say, well, these are things they do. And they're like, well, yeah, that's a reason they should be paying taxes. They behave like profitable businesses. Their CEOs are paid millions. They enjoy perks, and their workers, a large group of their workers are making the minimum wage or just above. They're sitting on millions of property. They don't pay taxes, and housing costs are going up. Chicago is a gigantic city, but I've done prior work on this in Pittsburgh, and people there, because they're a smaller city and they have a single newspaper, are very aware of the fact that UPMC there owns a vast amount of downtown property, and they keep buying it up. And it's not all for healthcare. They buy up parking garages, they do all this sort of stuff. And it's affecting markets. It's a place where they're stashing money that they're not giving to workers. And then it's also taking things off of the tax books for the municipalities, the counties, a lot of things, and it eventually is just becoming more and more of a problem. And they're investing in international hedge funds. Nobody likes the words international hedge funds. So here are the 4 that tested less effectively than those 4, but we've still, on every single thing we said about their corporation-like behavior, we got a majority or very close to a majority saying, yeah, that's a very strong argument. You've got a point there. They benefit from tax breaks, and they're building sort of luxury hospitals to get higher-end folks, but not necessarily doing their charity care. Again, when we make it just about employee wages, then people are seeing raises because the minimum wage is forcing them to go up, 52%. So, people are concerned about others, people who do the work all the time. But the fact that they're fudging a bit on charity care, people don't know that, but they don't like hearing it, and that they're squeezing smaller hospitals out of the market, which helps them to control wages and continue what they're doing right now, also a problem. So we did a revote on should healthcare organizations have to pay taxes after these arguments. We were already at 66% yes, so there's a limit to how much that's going to change. But it did go up another 12 points to 78% of people saying they should have to pay, that they should be paying more taxes. That's just a recap of everything I just said. So then we just put forward some more open-ended proposals for how these hospitals and healthcare organizations can be better community members and what we want out of them. And what I love is this real hard choice here that 75% of people strongly support. They should have a choice. They either reinvest in our communities, and that can mean a variety of things, but we think it means treating your workers with dignity and paying them more, or they should lose their tax-free status. It's one or the other. It's a very clear choice for people, and they overwhelmingly support it. They should be willing to reinvest their profits in our communities. I mean, that is, again, why they have the status they have. It's because this is what they're supposed to be doing. Create affordable health care by disclosing their prices, something that everybody likes and is not being done, and accepting patients regardless of insurance status. Again, that goes to charity care and whether they're spending an adequate amount of money on what they should be doing. And also a very strong argument, 2/3 strongly support. Workers can't live where they work because hospitals are buying tax-free property, they're making property less available, they're taking it off the books, that makes it harder for local governments. They should be paying a livable wage. And the support for that first one, hospitals should have a choice. They should reinvest or lose tax-free status. It has that, just that intense, like common sense, either or that people find very appealing, but the numbers are truly overwhelming. Non-college men who tend to trend more conservative, this is not a left-right issue. 82% strongly support that. Suburban cook, 81%. I mean, it's really high pretty much across the board, even to Republicans who think they should lose their tax-free status. 61% strongly support. I think what was so, one of the major things for us was how little difference there was between Chicago and this greater Chicagoland area as we defined it. And the other thing is that it's just not really a partisan issue, at least at the broad picture stage. And these are additional proposals that were also, again, this is like the lower, I would call this the less effective proposals, except that less effective is 60% strongly agree. We could really argue any of these. Workers deserve a voice, should be allowed to form a union without interference. 64% strongly agree. 74 and 82% overall agree with that. And this tracks with something, I caught it in a newspaper on Labor Day, that while we have a lower proportion of workers in labor unions than we've had in 100 years, the long-term trends are that people feel better about labor and the right to organize than ever. I've been watching Gallup hit a low point in like 2003 of like 45% of people just saying they don't like unions. That's dropped 15 points in 15 years and is now down to like 30%, which is a historical low of people having negative views. It's all the way up to 61, 62% of all Americans favorable. And Gallup's been asking that same question since 1938. So it's really an interesting trend line. Hospitals should support a wage board and commit to implementing recommendations, widely supported. Need an independent commission to put patient care and safety ahead of profits. And this was actually just a split form that brought in health disparities rooted in race and poverty. Still 59% strongly support committing to that. And I think that is my last overview slide.